Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan Ennis-Pitts, the Ukraine War Frontline update for the 3rd of January 2024. I was just having to look at something on my laptop that came up with the white screen. I think it was Adobe Acrobat. And it reminded me, do you remember, I don't know how long it was ago now, probably a year ago, where I had this controversy where I put it out to a poll, should I go to the dark theme or stay on the light theme? Everything previously had the white background and Twitter had the white background. And then I moved across to the dark theme, and lots of people were like, yes, and lots of other people were like, no, it's terrible. And then a year later, we've forgotten all about it. And occasionally, when I have to either switch back to the light theme to do something or other that requires me to do that, or I have a program that doesn't have a dark theme variation, I get blinded. It's amazing how much you normalize these things. Anyway, as we go to the map that JR has legendarily updated, and you can check out please check out the key to the map on the screen at the moment, rather than checking me out. I mean, feel free to check me out. Hey, I'm here for you. Let's go and look at what are you on about? We'll go to the northeastern axis from Kupiansk to Svatova to Crimea. And as you can see, not a lot of change to the mapping until we get down to actually this Ploschanka area here. Now, we can go to the ISW that suggests that geolocated footage published on the 2nd shows that Russian forces advanced west of Karmazianivka and Ploschanka. So that's to say the Russians have advanced in this direction, west of Ploschanka, and just up here west of Karmazianivka. And they provide some geolocated footage to suggest that is the case. And this is in terms of Karmazianivka. So this is an area that the Russians have been at, and the Ukrainians have dropped drone IEDs on them. That doesn't suggest to me an advance. That suggests that the Russians are exactly where at least my two source mappers here think they should be. That's right on a Russian defensive line. So I think that is fine. That confirms what the mappers already have. As we come further to the south, we have some movement for Andrew Perpetua for the Russians for his mapping. He signifies the Russians have moved to the west of Ploschanka, further westwards towards the Sherebets River. So remember, we've got 3 rivers in this area. You've got the Oskil River that ideally the Russians would like to get to. They are up there, north of Kupiansk at Dvorichna. And then you've got the Sherebets River that comes sort of up here through Torska and goes sort of like that. So they have crossed it over in this area. If you remember when they attacked around Sahivka, Novoherivka, Nadia, all this kind of area, this was them getting across the river. You can see it there. And then there's a 3rd river, the Krasna River, which goes up pretty much from Crimea through Krasnoyarchenska and then up to Svatova. So you've got those 3 rivers that will dictate the Russian activities and Ukrainian activities to some degree. I mean, you can see here that the Russians have dug in behind that Krasna River. They'd love to get to the Sherebets River as it comes down to the Serebyansky Forest. And ideally, really, they want to get all the way to the Oskil River to wrap up that whole Donbass region and have a little bit of a buffer zone. So that's the northeastern axis with a little bit of advance, as you can see, for the Russians. Then we come down to the Seversky front north of Bakhmut, where the Russians have made some fairly significant gains, as according to Suryat maps, in the Vesely area, both around Vesely or just south of Vesely, and also northeast of the town. That's northwest of Bilohorivka, this one here, the southern Bilohorivka, because there is indeed the other Bilohorivka there. So anyway, some activity, some advances for the Russians as they, according to Suryat maps, take control over new high positions northeast of Vesely, while at the same time troops have advanced south of the village on the map. So it would be interesting to see A, if that has happened, and B, what the Ukrainians do. How much of this area are they willing to cede to the Russians? There is some interesting topography around here. It's not on the one hand, it's not the easiest because of the topography, but on the other hand, actually attacking across flat ground, I think is even more difficult for the attacking side, because you can just be sighted from so far away and hammered by drones, artillery and mortars. So, that's what we see south of Avdiivka, isn't it, where the Russians are struggling to move forward because it's so flat. So perhaps this topography suits the defenders, perhaps it suits the attackers. But anyway, we'll see what happens there. I've talked about how it appears that the Russians have culminated, but we might see some sort of punctuations here and there. As we come to Bakhmut itself, Syriac Maps saying, and it's interesting, JR was speaking to me about this earlier, saying that they've actually walked back an area here that they talked about in terms of the grey zone has expanded, rather than the Ukrainians have advanced, or we got the mapping wrong, or something like that. And this is the way they kind of couch things, very much avoiding being positive to Ukraine at all. So, situation north of Bakhmut, the Russian army made new advances along the railway towards Chasiv Yar, so that's in this area. The grey area in Bodanivka was expanded. Okay, so nothing to do with either retreating, because actually the expansion of the grey zone is at the expense of the Russian-controlled area. So this is why JR has marked it with a blue pin here to suggest that they were up to this point, as according to Syriac Maps, and now they're back there. So they might have gained a little bit there, but they've lost some here. However, that is couched in, just a grey zone expanding, which is fair enough, but I always find it interesting the kind of the choice of words that Syriac has. Sorry, it's the advance was here, not there. So advancing along the railway line to the south of Bodanivka, but maybe ceding some ground to the Ukrainians here, where we have heard that the Ukrainians have been counterattacking of late. So that could be a continuation of that push back to make sure that the Russians don't get too close to Chasiv Yar. I think it's important, as I've said, that they establish some kind of strong defensive line around there. Otherwise, things will go south around Chasiv Yar. So then we come on to Klishchivka, where just south of Klishchivka, or south of Andriivka, along the railway line down to Zelenopilia, Syriac Maps says that the Russian army has continued increasing the buffer zone north of Kurdyamivka. So this is down this railway line, north of Kurdyamivka and Zelenopilia, just a tiny bit of gain for the Russians there, triangular field really. Actually, if we come further to the north, both Andrew Perpetua and Deep State Maps has an increase of Russian ground, not over the railway line, but kind of along the railway line as it circles round Klishchivka and comes down. There are different rumours coming out from Klishchivka, some saying that actually Ukrainians have height advantage and the Russians don't quite have the high trenches that they would like. We haven't heard anything out of this trench area, which I think is absolutely crucial. It's all about this zone to the west of Klishchivka on the high ground, where you've got this extensive trench network that it appears the Russians control half of, pretty much. As we flip that round and look at the 3D map and look at the topography, just to remind you, some of you will be newbies, this trench network overlooks Klishchivka. It's fairly high ground there, comparatively speaking, low ground down into Klishchivka, where that is basically just entirely rubble there. No houses are left standing, really. And this is easy pickings for any side that is up on this hill here, up on this ridge. They can just pick off with mortars, artillery and snipers, anyone down in Klishchivka. So the key to holding Klishchivka is holding these high grounds, which then, as I've said before several times, it renders it kind of pointless for the Ukrainians to continue advancing over there towards Kadema across the railway line in the easterly direction if they don't control the hills here, because they'll end up advancing in that direction and then being hit from behind by the Russians. So they need to keep hold of, if they're I don't know why that's just happened, if they are being really keen on holding Klishchivka, where we went there, then it's all about that high ground just behind it. And they need to kind of lay off putting too much effort into there until they've established control back of that trench network. Right, coming further to the south, well, actually, we'll pop into the ISW. There's probably a few things I've missed. Russian forces recently confirmed advances northwest and southwest of Bakhmut. Geolocated footage published on the 1st and 2nd indicates that Russian forces advance in the northern and eastern outskirts of Bodanivka. So this is a Russian advance there. This might be out of date now because we've subsequently seen Ukrainian advances in Bodanivka. But anyway, this is northwest of Bodanivka. Ukrainian shells on Russian positions. A geolocation to here, and we'll see. We'll pop that in. Oops, that's what have I done? Sorry, took that out of the browser. So here's the geolocation. German observer doing a bit of geolocating north of Bodanivka. We'll put that into Google and see what comes up. And we have that tree line. So this would be the evidence that supported the moving of the Russian control along that tree line previously. But I don't think it suggests any movement subsequent to what we have to that point. And of course, we've had the Ukrainians pushing back since then. I think below there's another geolocation of the Ukrainian shelling of Russian positions. So we just pop that one in as well and see where the Russians are with this geolocation. And that's further back. So nothing untoward going on there. Then we have further to the south, active hostilities on the southern flank of Bakhmut, attack of the armed forces of the Russian Federation by an infantry unit of the Ukrainians north of Kurdyivka, clean up of the stronghold of the armed forces of Ukraine by an assault group of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. So the auto translation of that is a bit mangled, but that certainly that last sentence it seems to imply that the Russians are cleaning up Ukrainian positions in this geolocated at this geolocated point, which is not there. We'll do that again. Sometimes it spits the dummy. So there we go. Along the railway line, that would suggest, I think, that Surrey Maps is correct in taking over those Ukrainian positions. Right. Okay, now we're going to pop on down south towards Avdiivka and see what this throws up for us. As we come to the northern area, you can see that in Stepova there are no changes to the mapping. North of Avdiivka, there's still quite a bit of activity around this area, but I think the ISW says is more positional around Novobakhmutivka at the moment, which sort of indicates that, whenever they say it's positional, it means, things have pretty much ground to a bit of a halt. So Russian forces recently made a confirmed advance northwest of Avdiivka as positional engagements continued near Avdiivka on the 1st and 2nd. Geolocated footage published on the 31st, so this is going back a few days now, indicates that Russian forces advanced northwest of Stepova. In fact, I'm not even going to bother doing that geolocation because it is that far out of date. I mean, I do have it, but it's not going to be particularly relevant anymore. Things have moved on since then. Mashevets, who's a Ukrainian observer, stated on January the 2nd, Stepova is a contested grey zone, and it's positional fighting continued northwest of Avdiivka at Novobakhmutivka, Badichi, and the coke plant near Stepova, southeast of Avdiivka, the industrial zone, and southwest near Pervomaisky and Nevelska. In other words, it's all positional. It's all pretty positional. People are dug in. Things aren't moving too much. It might be that the Russians will mount another big attack by accumulating some forces. There are rumours that they are accumulating forces, both here and in Bakhmut. I've not seen any particular evidence of that yet. But yeah, it looks fairly unmoving at the moment. Right, then we come on down further to the south. Geolocated footage published on December 14th and on January the 1st, so that's quite two very different dates there, indicates that Russian forces previously marginally advanced in the northeastern outskirts of Novomykhailivka. So that's interesting. So advance on the northern outskirts. Now, these are stationary vehicles. State and the age is unclear, presumably Russian, though MTLB was also hit by Sudoplatov. So there are things that hit by both sides, possibly in this group of vehicles and whatnot. So if I geolocate one of these, and you'll get an idea that all of this equipment is in this general area. So there you have, one road or tree line, one area where all of those different geolocations are from. We'll pop that in. And this is Novomokilivka, which is south of Avdiivka on this eastern front line. And yeah, so interesting. So if there are vehicles there, that would suggest, well, it would suggest it's a grey zone and that the Russians have been attacking there. If vehicles are blown up, it doesn't necessarily, in fact, probably means that they don't at the moment control that. So that would confirm, well, it wouldn't disconfirm the mapping, let's say that. So yeah, destroyed equipment around this area, as we have seen destroyed equipment all all around here. The grey zones were, in order for the Russians to take territory off the Ukrainians, they had to move through the grey zone. And so if the Russians are going to be blown up anyway, it's more likely to be in the grey zone. So that suggests that, I think, mapping, well, as I say, it doesn't disconfirm the mapping. Right, moving on from Novomokilivka. There's not too much else. No, I don't think anything else in the sources there. We'll go back to the ISW that talks a little bit about the Zaporizhia line. No, that's I didn't mean to highlight all of that. I've got that up a bit. I meant to highlight the whole Krinky bit. So if we come to past the Velika Novosilka area on this southern front line, which is there, no change from in terms of the mapping there. A little bit of a change in favour of the Ukrainians here in the Verbove area, and there have been a few claims today from the General Staff. So Defence Forces knocked out the Russians from some positions near Verbove and Zaporizhia and did not let defences break through in the Avdiivka and Kupiansk directions, says the General Staff, and that's kind of parroted in a number of places here by Tim White on the map. Verbove is highlighted as Ukraine says it's regained some positions there, and that possibly reflected in what Surat Maps has. It doesn't look like it's too huge, though. No tweets about it, just a bit of a rejig maybe, but it would fit in line with this claim that there are some gains for the Ukrainians, or we might see that gain change the mapping over the next 24 hours. So I guess we'll have to wait and see. If we come to the ISW, I did have it highlighted, but I had to restart my computer and it takes all my highlights away and I had to redo them and I cocked it up. So sorry about that. Anyway, it says that positional engagements continue on 1st and 2nd. No confirmed changes to the frontline area. A Russian mill blogger claimed on the 31st, so New Year's Eve, that Russian forces advance in unspecified areas 7 kilometers wide and 1.8 kilometers deep between Novoprokopivka and Verbove. That's kind of what we've seen, which is all of this area. In fact, let's measure that. So basically, they advance from there to there. That's about 4 kilometers deep at the most. Obviously, they didn't do that all at once. But yeah, 7 kilometers wide, 1.8 kilometers deep. So it would have been, part of that advance there. Between Novoprokopivka and Verbove, a prominent Russian mill blogger claimed on the 1st that Ukrainian forces recaptured unspecified positions south of Verbove. And that could refer to, that's coming from the 1st, but could be referring to activity that the General Staff has then referred to. So you don't know whether the General Staff are talking about something that happened 2 days ago or in the last 24 hours. It's a bit of an unknown. So anyway, quite a bit of activity going on there. A Russian source claimed that Russian forces have recaptured 38 of the 327 square kilometers that Ukrainian forces captured during the summer 2023 counteroffensive on the Zaporizhia front, although ISW has not observed visual evidence of that claim. I've been wondering about that, because if you think that the Ukrainian counteroffensive broadly came to an end, I don't know when you wanted to find that, probably October, and there's been this kind of weird scenario where the Russians have massively pushed, say, in Avdiivka, and then started pushing more broadly elsewhere. I'm trying to work out that if this was a true number, is that impressive, or is that actually not very impressive? So the counteroffensive for the Ukrainians took 327 square kilometers, and that went from May to October. That's May, June, July, August, September, and then into October. So that's maybe 5.5 months. And we've now had maybe 3 months of the Russians pushing back to get a tenth of that, or maybe a ninth of that. Actually, that's not quite as good as the Ukrainians were doing. But then it depends where you delineate these periods. To be honest, right. Anyway, moving on to the Krinky area, which is here. As you can see, no changes to the mapping in Krinky, in Dnipro River Delta, anywhere really. We haven't seen it move here for some time, and then it was to squeeze that bridgehead a little bit more. The Russians very much wanting to push the Ukrainians across the river again, obviously. The ISW says positional fighting continued on the east bank of the Kherson Oblast on the 1st and 2nd, but there were no confirmed changes to the front line. Ukrainian forces repelled a slightly increased number of Russian ground attacks near Krinky on the 1st. Russian forces reportedly conducted a strike, and this is, to me, pretty much the most significant news on the whole of the front line today. Just one little sentence here. Russian forces reportedly conducted a strike with FAB 1500. So that is a massive glide bomb on Ukrainian positions in Kachakarivka, northwest of Kherson, on the west bank of the Dnipro. So you've got Kherson down here, and northwest is somewhere over here, Kachakarivka. I don't know exactly where that is. I'm not so bothered about the position of that, but the fact that they are still doing that, or they have started doing that again. So using glide bombs is something they haven't done since the Su-34s were shot down in this area. 3 of them were shot down by the Patriot, what was thought to be the Patriot, recently, and they haven't been using those glide bombs, which they were using incredibly effectively against the Ukrainians. Yep, they're not always accurate, and sometimes they hit their own troops, but when you fire enough of them, they cause a serious issue. And I think it's been fantastic that the Ukrainians have hit those planes and stopped those glide bombs being used. They're starting to use them again, and one, it means they're confident that the Patriot system is not in position, and 2, it's going to cause the Ukrainians quite an issue again. And I'm just going to see if I can find that place. Okay, in trying to find this place, let's have a game of what places have you heard the names of before. So this is Kherson City, and I was just looking around here. It's like, oh, Bodanivka. Oh, we've just been around Bodanivka up in Bakhmut. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, well, surely there won't be too many other places with the same name. I mean, that'd be crazy. Oh, Konstantinivka. Oh, not the one near behind Bakhmut as well. Novoselivska, the one up near Svatova. Interesting. And then you just keep Persha Travnevi, the one up in the Sinkivka area. You go on. Oh, Pervomaisky, the one in the Avdiivka area. Blahadatny. Oh, the one in the in the Bakhmut area. I mean, I could just play this game endlessly. This is one of my favorite mapping games of all the one mapping game I know. Anyway, I couldn't find a place that was hit, but I have found 72 other places with the same names as other places that we know on the map. So there is that. Anyway, thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share. Really appreciate all your support. Take care. Thanks so much to the members who allow me to keep doing this. I'm going to give a big shout out tomorrow to people who've helped me on Buy Me a Coffee and PayPal. Thank you so much for that. It allows me to continue doing what I do. Take care. I'll speak to you soon.